Welcome to Viking.TV with me, Gaby Huddart. I'm excited to be bringing you a very delicious episode of Gaby's Friends today, as I'm going to be in conversation with someone who is a culinary legend, not only in the UK, but also globally. Rick Stein has been working in the world of food for a staggering 55 years, and for many, he is the godfather when it comes to fish cookery. His seafood restaurant in beautiful Padstow in Cornwall first put Rick on the map, and he's since opened several other restaurants in Padstow and in other locations around the UK, as well as 2 in New South Wales, Australia, with his wife Sarah. Rick is adored by millions worldwide for his TV series and cookbooks that showcase fabulous food from different countries. I think this is really because he does far more than just merely show recipes with us. He really brings the heart and soul of a dish to life. There's an emotional element to every plate of food he makes or talks about. This has never been truer than with Rick's new book and series, Food Stories, inspired by his travels around the British Isles, and which we're going to start chatting about today. So thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure.
Obviously we're here because of your new book, Food Stories, which is just out, which is wonderful. And I think when people first look at it, what will probably surprise them most to start with is the sheer diversity of cuisines and food types in the book.
Yeah.
But, you know, because it's about the British Isles, and you know, I was quite surprised about that. Were you surprised when you were researching it?
Well, I mean, I came up with the idea really because I sort of realised there was so much diversity, and I was sort of a bit. Well, the idea actually came. I sort of borrowed it from an American food writer called David Rosengarten. And it's called, I bought the book about 20 years ago called It's All American Food. And I just long thought I could probably do the same. Basically what he's saying in there, that American food isn't like, you know, Turkey, Thanksgiving and all the other sort of national dishes, I suppose. It's about all the immigrant communities that have come to America over the years. And therefore you can't just talk about American food without bringing in Italian, Korean, Nepalese, whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought we could do exactly the same about here, really. So it was really one strand of the food stories was to sort of celebrate the diversity of our cooking. Slightly also from a sort of defensive point of view, because you still get people, French people, Americans particularly, I've noticed, saying, oh, the food in the UK is dreadful, which it's not. And we know it's not. So it's a sort of like, not that they'll probably, I can't imagine it going on French television or American television, but nevertheless, it was sort of saying, you know, we are actually got some of the best food in the world.
And I mean, you know, I mentioned the fact that you've had this incredibly long career. Presumably you've seen that kind of diversity of cuisines in the 55 years that you've been working in restaurants has changed kind of dramatically over that time.
Well, it has, and I mean, I am that soldier, really, because when I opened in 1975, the seafood restaurant, I mean, the menu was basically just incredibly local dishes with a nod to France, which I'd been going to quite a lot, particularly to Britain in Normandy. But it was the sort of food that in the 70s you'd associate, if there was such thing as a fish restaurant, there were a few, sort of very grilled whole fish, not necessarily Dover sole because it was too expensive even then, but grilled whole lemon sole. Grilled lobster we used to do. Baked crab we did with a bit of cheese. It wasn't Parmesan cheese. And we used to do, I mean, we couldn't do mussels even then because you couldn't get them. We didn't have oysters then because they're really hard to get. So the menu was really, really simple. And basically a lot of grilled mackerel we did, and actually grilled sea bass, and we did a sea trout dish, which actually I think I called it oven baked sea trout, but it was actually done in a microwave. So it was really simple and not really owing much to any other countries apart from France, with a nod to Italy, I think. But as people started travelling more, and the whole sort of information in newspapers, magazines, and that started to bring in a lot more foreign food. And, people travel, I remember when the sort of package tours started in earnest in the 70s, thinking, we're going to get no more business really, because everybody will be going off to the sun. Yeah. We did continue to get business, but people began to get much more knowledgeable about food just by going, Greece, Spain, Italy.
And more sophisticated palates.
Yes, definitely. And the same with me. I sort of grew up at the same time as everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously travelled so much for your TV and your work and your books over the years. Is there anything that you have tasted or tried in other parts of the world that you think we haven't got in the UK yet and that you'd like to see come over here?
It's hard to think of anywhere because it's more or less you go and find something anywhere. I mean, I don't know, about 10 years ago I started, I went to Hawaii with my wife Sass from Australia because it's 9 hours flight from Australia, which is close there.
Yes.
So I went a few times with her and had a pokey, in New Zealand, in Hawaii, and just thought, this is fabulous. We haven't got that back in the UK. Well, of course, now it's everywhere. Yeah. So it's almost, there's nothing that you pick up overseas abroad that you don't very quickly find in the UK. You know, I suppose the only thing, funnily enough, in this book and in the TV series, there is some Filipino food in the UK, but not much. But we filmed in Belfast in this container restaurant. It was like a group of shipping containers with a sort of covered patio in front of them in a sort of demolished theatre site, demolished cinema site. So it was just an open space, rainy day, a bit cold in Belfast. Sat down to Sunday lunch Filipino style and blew my mind,
Yeah, amazing.
So it's almost, if you want to find the food of another country, better off staying in the UK. Yeah. It saves you a lot of money in airfares.
Yeah, although, I mean, you obviously spend a lot of your time in Australia now, and I was going to say, we're going to talk a lot more about some of the food stories in this book, but is there anywhere else outside the UK that really excites you when it comes to the food that you really love going?
Well, I mean, I always love going to the Southeast Asia. I mean, Sass and I have started stopping off at the moment just in Singapore because we always go BA or Qantas, which is where the planes land, for 2 nights. And that was probably one of the first places I ever went to, Singapore, in the 70s. And just was completely knocked out by the food. The 80s, actually, the early 80s for my young family. And people are a bit rude about Singapore because it's so prosperous now and so sort of air conditioned. But it's still great food there. I mean, I went there a few weeks ago, and the time before I went specifically to have a Singapore chili crab because we do it on the menu in Padstow. I just want to make sure it hadn't sort of drifted off course a bit, which is fab.
Yeah.
So I mean, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur have always really excited me, and Bangkok as well. I've been there lots of times. In other parts of the world, we just love Mexico, Sass and I. And I mean, I've done one book in Mexico. I just find it's sort of almost like a parallel universe to the sort of Southeast Asia, because you've got lots of very, very sort of strong flavours and lots of chili, lots of colour. So, I really like going back there. And I love going back to Spain, Italy, Greece particularly. I'm just off to Greece next week, actually, after this book tour, on the plane, straight to Athens. So there you go.
Oh, excellent. And I mean, it was one of the things that I mentioned in the intro, is that all these places, with you, it's never, with any of your books, any of your TV series, it's never about the plate of food. It's always about the passion, the emotion that's gone into that plate of food from the person behind it. It is the story behind the dish that I think really differentiates your approach to food and your programmes from other
the reason for that is quite simple, that you can get any recipe for anything on the internet now. So, I mean, why would anybody want to buy a book by me if you can save your money and get the dish on the internet? But the point is that what I do is go and find the dish and talk to the people that cook it. And I mean, that's particularly the case, funnily enough, with this shipping container restaurant in Belfast. The lady that cooked it, her name was Narelle. It was talking to her that really sort of, because what's really good when you're talking to somebody about their cuisine is, because I do a lot of cooking, you instantly have a
you've
really
got something in common.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and it's really good fun.
Yeah.
Because you can ask questions about how things are cooked where, I know roughly how they're going to do it. As soon as, there's this dish in there called pork adobo, which is basically their sort of national dish, and it's vinegar, because of the Spanish influence in the Philippines, vinegar, brown sugar or cane sugar, and the vinegar is cane vinegar and soy sauce, really,
Sounds delicious.
and a bit of fish sauce. Yeah. But it's this sort of, they reduce the sauce down till it coats the meat almost till it's dry, so it's like a sort of glaze with this lovely sort of vinegary, and there's some spice, but not a lot. And I was just saying, this is just fab,
Yeah. I found, that story was really interesting. I think the one that probably touched me the most is your trip to Bristol.
Yeah.
And to the Huria cafe.
Yes.
So it'd be nice if you perhaps tell viewers about that, because that experience was really, it's quite a special place, isn't it?
Well, it is, because it's very nice when you're making a series or writing a book, when doing the TV or book, to sort of balance things a bit. And a lot of the time it is sort of celebrating a dish, and again in Bristol I did a thing on jerk chicken, right? I had this fantastic guy from Jamaica who was sort of, every move that he made in his jerk chicken, he was talking to his ancestors, right? It's just, and sort of, and that was funny, and he was sweet and a lovely dish. But this one was quite serious because this lady, Kim, from from the Cape Verde Islands, right? But sort of been in the UK for most of her life. She started this little cooperative in a community centre in Bristol, and it's basically women. It's women that have been subjected to modern slavery. I didn't go into any of the details as to what that modern slavery was. Didn't want to know. But the thing that made it so special is that they actually cook for the public. They do events. They cook in the community centre for people coming in, and they're really, really grateful customers. But they cook their own national dishes. And one of the two women with her was from Egypt, who cooked her national dish. It's funny, there was a Brain of Britain question which mentioned the dish. Name I've forgotten, of course, but what African dish, what country is this African dish? Egypt, I said, because it was Egypt.
Oh, fantastic.
And then there was Pakistan, the other lady. And what was so good was that they were cooking their own food, but as soon as they started cooking it, they're really enlivened up by remembering what it was like back home in their own countries. And the response from the public has been fantastic for them. And it's just the way they said this community centre and Kim had just changed their life.
Yeah.
And it was, I didn't need to say anything. You could just see it in their faces, They were just like...
and after they've been through such a traumatic experience, whatever that is, but it's getting their confidence back through cooking.
Yeah, it is. That was what it was.
And a sense of purpose. I think that is far more than just the dish they're creating, but it's given them a sense of purpose. And what an incredible place.
Well, it is, and it just sort of, as I said, I don't know what terrible things they were subjected to, but you could just see their personalities blossoming again,
Yeah.
And I just think food is so important for all of us, and the way we relate to it is what we're all about, because for goodness sake, it's the most important thing we have to do in life is to eat, to stay alive.
Yes, so. Yeah, it is. But it is, it is not everybody's as able to bring the emotion out in a plate of food.
No.
Another one I think that I'm going to ask you to talk about, because I've met her, is Giovanna Eusebi from Eusebi Deli in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And she was sort of talking about her food and almost had me weeping
Yes.
because she's so passionate about it. And I mean, she worked her magic on you as well, didn't
Well,
she?
yeah, because I mean, I just love the Italians because they're so enthusiastic about their food, and they've got it because they just relate everything. I mean, many Italians to eating. I mean, there's just always. I just remember this wonderful scene in one of Fellini's films called Amarcord, which means in English "remembered with love," and it's just about, I think, Rimini on the east coast of Italy. It was that time, but before the war, and it was just about his childhood. And there's this just fabulous family meal with the whole family there. I think they're eating pasta, but they're arguing all massively, shouting, gesticulating. But you can tell they're just enjoying themselves and shouting a lot. And I mean, the thing about Giovanna, I mean, she's just a lovely woman, you know. And what I was trying to put over there was just how important the sort of Italian diaspora is in Chicago, in Glasgow. It could be Chicago, but this happens to be Glasgow.
Well, it could be, yes. It could be lots of places around the world, actually. I mean, the Italians have gone to so many places with their food and set up restaurants.
But I mean, I think particularly in Glasgow, and I just love the way they've maintained that sort of communication back with Italy.
Yeah.
And I guess because it's quite close, but she goes over there regularly, and she's still got that sort of, Italian sort of passion. So I mean, when you do the research, I don't do it. One of my friends does most of the research for it, and you get somebody like Giovanna, and you just say, "Thank you, God."
Yes.
She's such a good talker.
Absolutely. And I mean, it may be a very simple plate of food, but because she's serving to you with a whole lot of love, it just tastes a lot better, doesn't it?
You're so right that I think when people give you something like that, it tastes better, because we're all like very psychological. We just don't sort of. It's not just that is good, that is not good. It's how it's presented to you and the story behind it.
Yes, no, absolutely. But with Italian food, why is it that you think? Because it is one of the most popular cuisines all around the world, and you mentioned Chicago, where in Australia there's a huge Italian community there. But it's one of our go-to cuisines, both to eat out and to now make in our own lives, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why do you think that is? Just
well, it's really hard. It's funny enough. I've just been listening to The Rest Is History, and there's a whole program about. I can't remember what the name of. I should remember of the food historian that writes about it, and he just said. Actually, a lot of what you think is sort of traditional Italian food, yes, it comes from Italy, but most of the dishes in Italy are from cities, not from the country. And this idea of sort of mamas cooking, your grandmas or I can't remember what the Italian word, nonnas.
Yeah, nonna.
Cooking like long, they did cook tomato sauce, but most of them lived in Milan or in Naples, not out in the country. And that was a bit of a fabrication from the States in the 50s. And the whole idea of this guy was saying of the Mediterranean diet, which doesn't really mean much in northern Italy, it certainly does in southern, was invented by the Americans,
Oh, really?
And there's a sort of element in Italian food which is a bit sort of marketing,
Yes.
They just love a good sort of emotional story about their relatives.
I'm sold.
Exactly, so
it
am I.
Works, doesn't it? It does work.
But they were sort of saying, for example, that the original pizzas, yes, they came from Naples, but they used to just cover them in pig fat. It was just like leavened dough cooked in the way they cooked them in a pizza oven. It's made with pig fat. None of your tomato and your sort of colours of the Italian flag. And pasta itself, it was saying, came from Sicily, but it was originally from the Middle East, not from any idea it came from China. Well, I love those stories.
Yes,
though.
I know. It is the derivation of dishes and where they originally came from.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, the thing about the Italians is they've got it. Their food is very simple. They've got a sort of incredible intelligence, I think, about what is a good dish. And they, maybe they do invent a little bit of the history. But, I didn't say in food stories it always has to be a true story. It could be a bit
if it enhances someone's pleasure.
Exactly.
Now, another story that I think was very touching in the book is that of the two Rays in Morecambe.
Oh, I love the two Rays.
And I think this one's special as well because you first visited there in
Ray
one of your
Edmondson,
Ray, in your TV series 20 years ago.
Yes.
So can you, because the two Rays, it's basically two men,
Yeah.
both called Ray.
Yes.
And can you just explain to us what they do and why they're so special? Because it is a very touching story.
Well, they're shrimp fishermen. Morecambe Bay. Morecambe Bay is a vast, really, I think, beautiful. I mean, you look across the Morecambe Bay to the Lake District, actually, and it's just a great vista. And because it's sort of miles and miles of flat sand and mud, the tide comes in and goes out very fast. If you might remember, some years ago, some poor Chinese people that were fishing for or gathering cockles all drowned because they didn't realise how fast the tide comes in. The first Ray Edmondson, I first met 20 years ago, who not only was fishing for shrimps at the time, but also had a little shop where he was boiling them and making potted shrimps. So I went back to see him, and he was still doing the same thing, but he'd given up the fishing. The other Ray goes fishing, but he doesn't use a boat anymore. He uses a tractor, right? Because you can drive the tractor right out across the sands, and the shrimps get caught in gullies when the tide goes out, so they're all there. And he's got this fantastically old, crumbly equipment to net these shrimps. And I remember saying to him, sort of slightly incredulously, because the tractor was so old, And I said, this, and I was sort of like putting it on a bit. I said, Ray, this is quite old, your tractor, a bit rusty. He said, oh no, yeah. I said, well, do you ever, does it ever conk out? Yeah, occasionally. And what I didn't say was I suspect a lot of people knew about these poor Chinese people, that it's really dangerous, right?
Yes.
But he wasn't bothered. I mean, he went out. We weren't allowed to go out with him because of insurance purposes, reasons these days. I would have loved to go out with him. But in a way, it was better we didn't, because I just stood on the shore and talked a bit about how beautiful Morecambe Bay was. And in due course, he came back with the shrimps. And I just asked him, I just said, do you enjoy what you did? And he's just such a nice man, honestly. I do think there's something to be said for fishermen and farmers as well. Being out and about and busy, it's sort of, it brings out the best in people.
Yeah, sense of purpose.
Yeah. And also being, you might say, well, Morecambe Bay's all mud. It's like Liverpool. It's the same part of the country, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting there because that's quite a sort of old-fashioned story, and you talked about that passion. There's also in your research for the book, you went to the other extreme, which is that ultra modern farm of entrepreneur and inventor James Dyson.
Yes.
And I think that is really interesting because that is, if you can tell us about that. I mean, it's so futuristic, isn't it?
It was.
In how he's farming there. I mean, really brave new world almost.
It was, and I just thought then that, is this going to go down too well? Because, I mean, he is going to have all those strawberries picked. He's got like a 7-acre greenhouse where he grows strawberries specifically for the winter market, right? And you might say it's not great, that why would you eat strawberries in the winter, right? And I asked him that, and he said, well, people do,
Because people love strawberries.
Because people love strawberries. But what he worked out was that if you grow them in greenhouse conditions, you can pick the strawberries and have them in the supermarkets, in the shops, within 24 hours of being picking. In normal cases, you get your strawberries in the winter, probably from Morocco or Tunisia, because that's the only place they're warm enough to grow in the winter, and you've got all that overland sort of transport. So he's laughing, really. But the other thing he does is the whole of his greenhouses are heated and run by energy derived from what is essentially compost. So he grows sort of cereal crops and composts them, and the energy he gets from it, he uses to power everything.
So although, because I mean, I sort of, read between the lines. You sounded in the book, and you sound almost a reluctant fan of his and what he's doing.
Well,
there.
I mean, I just suppose, you have to be a bit careful because everybody got a bit irritated with him when he upped and took all his manufacturing over to Singapore or wherever it was. But I warmed to him simply because it is a sort of future of farming that makes sense because it's entirely self-sufficient. So he's actually selling energy to the national grid, even and running everything on his farm with it. And we saw they're called digesters.
Yeah,
It was sort of something out of science fiction.
I mean,
really.
it is interesting, and I suppose in the way that you have seen, food and restaurants develop over your career, we'll have to see farming develop in that way, looking ahead, won't we? I mean, for the environment and for
I think so. I mean, the
population
his environmental sort of status is pretty damn good, to be honest. So I mean, I do admire him because most of his inventions, his designs are really clever and really, and he's just applying the same thoughts to something like farming strawberries.
Yeah.
Strawberries were very nice, must say.
Well, and there's a very good strawberry
the
sorbet in your
sorbet,
book, which is delicious. Yeah. And actually, before I interview any chef, I always make one dish from the book. And I was a bit short of time for this. So the one that I made, so I'm going to get the title right for everybody. I opted for it's cod with linguine, tomato and coarse green pesto that I made because it was very simple. So when I was looking for recipes, it was easy to get ingredients, not too many, and it was absolutely delicious, quick to make, so my kind of dish. But this dish also has quite a story behind it because you developed it for the Royal Brompton Hospital after you had your open heart surgery.
Yeah, well, the first thing was my last book, Simple Suppers. I started the whole book intro, which is really weird for a cookery book, but that's the muse struck me about having this open heart surgery and having a really lovely dish, a simple dish of pan-fried, very fresh haddock, with some slow roasted peppers, some chives, some olive oil, a bit of soy sauce. Really simple, and it just tasted wonderful. And I think that in hospital kitchens you occasionally get somebody doing a bit of a job and probably come out of a restaurant somewhere. And I think it was a Frenchman. I'm not who did this dish that night. And I just assumed everything was going to be fine. So I had the operation, which was pretty tough.
Yeah.
Because I'm a member of the Unzip Club now.
Wow.
Cut all
we
through
won't get
your
you
lids.
to
Probably not. But the next morning they get you up. That's what you do. They get you up after the operation and have you sort of struggling around the ward with loads of tubes coming out of you and going into you. And I wrote about that, and I wrote about this very nice girl from the kitchen came up and said, "What would you like for lunch tomorrow?" Which happened to be Sunday lunch, so I went for roast lamb and mint sauce because I thought, there was that haddock wasn't on there anymore, and it was terrible, but probably terrible because I was sort of, very on the morphine at the time.
Yes.
But I sort of resolved during my convalescence in hospital to write a book about simple dishes, and it wasn't like a complete sort of moment of revelation. I'd been thinking about it, but I just thought I'd bring that into it.
But you did actually develop some dishes for the hospital.
I did,
didn't you?
and they, I suppose that they, I was a bit rude about cooking, but we're all a bit rude about hospital food, and basically it serves a purpose. But it really, they got in touch with me and said, okay, taking what you said, would you give us a couple of recipes, right? So I did, and that one was one because I was really trying to keep the costs down and keep it simple.
Yeah.
And I mean, it worked really well. And I put in there because at the time
absolutely, I can vouch how delicious. Is it on the menu at the hospital still?
I don't know, actually. I should find out.
I wondered whether you were still in touch with them and whether they...
Well, I will get in touch with them.
We need to find out whether they're still serving these dishes. Now, I mentioned obviously at the beginning that, your career has spanned 55 years.
Yeah.
Does it feel that long to you?
Well, not really. I mean, funny enough, the restaurant, the seafood's been open for 50 years next year.
Amazing.
So,
50th anniversary.
Yeah,
That's amazing. So have you got some sort of special plans in Padstow to celebrate, mark the occasion?
yeah. I mean, this is, I'm not in charge anymore, so that it's being done. But they have suggested, which I think would be quite funny. I think in March we're going to have a disco at the seafood restaurant where me and my son Ed, who still does the vinyls, going back to my days as a DJ.
Oh, amazing!
So, I just it'd be so funny because I mean there'd be a lot of sort of Doors and Led Zeppelin and maybe not too much appreciated, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, let's hope you don't get the licence revoked, though.
Oh, no,
You've got to be a little bit careful. History could repeat itself 50 years on.
But then I think we're going to invite as many of the past chefs and, staff right from the word go, which would be really good.
Oh, amazing.
So that should be fun. And then, I mean, lots of customer events as well, I think. Not too many. Don't want to make a massive deal out of it, but just keep it understated.
But I mean, it is special, like you say. Not many restaurants make it to 50 years. So
no,
and I mean, I think I in the intro called you the godfather of fish cookery. I think you're certainly, you'll earn that title even more. To get a restaurant to 50 years old is incredible.
Well, I suppose so. I always think of running restaurants. I was doing a chat on this book tour the other night, and I said it's a bit like playing snakes and ladders. Sometimes you're going up the ladder, but most of the time you're going down on the snakes.
Oh, well, I hope next year's a really good one. And,
should be all right.
Yeah, I shall make sure to revisit during that time.
I've just been very lucky. I mean, for the half of that time I was cooking all the time.
Yeah.
And when I turned 50, actually, I just thought I can't carry on doing this because it's quite a busy restaurant. So I gradually gave it up. Also because I was then starting to do telly quite regularly, but I've really enjoyed it, and I suppose I would never have thought how it would have ended up when I opened the restaurant, but it's just it just changes all the time. So I mean, there's no way I could go and do a service in any of those kitchens anymore. But I really enjoy eating in the restaurants, going to the kitchen, saying when things are not totally to my liking. I mean, on Saturday night I had scallops and turbot in a sort of little ragu, and the cream sauce had been reduced too much. So I went in there and said, it's got to be fresh tasting. You can't take it down too much. It's just a, fish stock, white wine, cream, basil. Simple, but I just love going in there, not picking people up.
So it is still your food and your dishes and your quality control, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you could, looking back over the expanse of your career, could you pick out one or two highlights for you that you have just been moments or periods of time that you think, I really, they were brilliant. That those moments.
Well, I think, in restaurant terms, I mean, we've never had a Michelin star, but I can see why. It's just not that sort of food. But I mean, it sort of getting into the Good Food Guide was a really good moment for me, and actually staying there and, for, I don't know, 20 years now, I suppose, I don't know, but getting in there, and that was sort of recognition which I really, really thought was great. In terms of personally, my first book called English Seafood Cookery, it won a Glenfiddich Award, which in the 80s and 90s was the food award. It's now probably Observer Food Monthly or Fortnum and Mason Awards. And I mean, I just never expected to win that because I was just like a nobody really, but I just always remember Jane Grigson, Sophie Grigson's mother, who wrote, probably my favourite fish book called Fish Cookery, came to the restaurant out of the blue. I mean, I didn't know at the time she was a judge for the Glenfiddich Award, so I just felt, completely... but then to have won that award, it was just like, looking back on it, of course, I was a young and enthusiastic and hard-working chef, and we're always looking for the new kids on the block.
Yeah.
But at the time, I thought, this is unbelievable, choosing me. So that was really special. Then, of course, I mean, the TV was, very, very special. And to be honest, I think I'll make quite special about the 50th birthday.
Yeah, no, that's really special. But also, you won for our American viewers, you won a Commander of the Order of the British Empire.
Yeah.
That we actually call a CBE.
Yeah.
In 2018, in recognition of what you've done for the economy, obviously particularly in Cornwall. How did that feel? I mean, that's an amazing
Absolutely.
award to get. Was that
Absolutely.
pretty special?
Yeah, because I mean, I was, incredibly chuffed about that, I must say.
Because that's the top one. I mean, you
is.
can get your OBE or your MBE, but the CBE is the that's the big one, isn't it?
Yeah, an OBE. One of my friends said that's other buggers' efforts. Can't remember what he said about a CBE, but yeah. But I mean, I think it's testimony to how important hospitality, or as my Australian wife says, hospo, is in the country now.
Yeah.
Sometimes we feel we're a bit sort of underappreciated by our respective governments, but hey ho, probably everybody feels that. But I just think it's over those 50 odd years since we opened in the 70s. I think the whole hospitality industry has got bigger and bigger and more important to the economy.
More important.
So it's really important
and
to me.
being a CBE, has that changed your life in any way?
No. No, I don't go around.
You don't go around reminding people.
No, I should. I think.
Yes,
yeah.
I think I probably would if I ever got one. Now you're now, I think I'm right in saying 77 years old.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And you've come a long way. I've been listening to various old interviews that you've done, but you were a teenager who went travelling to get over your father's death. When you were only, I think, 17 or 18. And you literally packed up and you went off on your travels, your first travels. And then you finally came back and in your early 20s pulled it out the bag and got yourself into Oxford University, which is extraordinary, to study English. And you sort of fell into restaurants by accident, really, didn't you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I just find it. I don't find it like embarrassing to talk about it, but it's a bit complicated. But I spent 3 years doing English at Oxford, but I left with no real idea what I wanted to do in my life. So just to fill in time, I'd run a mobile disco in Oxford and back in Cornwall and in London as well, really. So I don't know how it happened, but there was a nightclub in Padstow that I bought with a friend of mine. Both of us inherited a bit of money. This was in the sort of early 70s. And I just was intended to turn it into a sort of like, I don't know, a sort of disco.
Yeah.
And I suppose it was too early for sort of discos, really, certainly in somewhere like Cornwall. But when we bought it, it had already got a license to serve booze with food till 1 o'clock in the morning, which in those days, in the early 70s, it just didn't happen in sort of rural England, and nobody really, looking back on it, none of my customers really could handle the booze, and a lot of the customers were quite rough fishermen, to be honest. But I mean, they're, I still say hello to them on the quay when I'm having a coffee down there. But there was a lot of fights, a lot of heavy drinking, and people just couldn't take it, the drink. And we eventually Johnny and I found it really hard to keep order because neither of us, we were like, a bit green wet behind the ears, really.
Yeah, we were very young.
We were very young and just had no idea of what you need to do to run a proper nightclub. And it folded because the police declared, I was hauled up before the magistrates by the police, and I was declared not a fit and proper person to hold a licence. So I had to do something else. I opened the restaurant, really.
It's amazing. I mean, if you could say anything to your younger self then, when you were you had your licence revoked and you had your dream of your nightclub, and if you could talk to that young Rick now, what would you say to him? Well,
I'd just say it'll pass, because I think the reality of it for me was it was actually a really good thing that happened to me. It was a kick up the backside, really. One of the lovely things was that the police were responsible for closing us down. And about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years after we'd opened, and we're doing really quite well then, the police inspector invited me over to his house for afternoon tea.
Oh.
And he just said, we felt so sorry for you. He said, but we, you're just not really doing the right thing. And he just said, I'm so happy for you that you're doing well,
Yeah.
And I just think, a lot of my friends, and I'm probably sure a lot of your friends, started off doing things that they haven't ended up doing. And I guess, perhaps having got a degree at Oxford, maybe running a sort of restaurant on the quayside in Padstow was not what I should be doing. But once I got stuck into it, it's,
look where your life has led since into Australia. You've got restaurants in Australia and you've travelled the world. I mean, looking, now the other way to the future, what would you, what are you dying to do next? Are you kind of more travel or more expansion? Because you have, you own quite a few restaurants now.
Well, it's quite hard work keeping them all going. And that, when I say hard work, it's really enjoyable work. And, some of them are better than others. And there's always things going wrong. But I just really like putting them right, and I don't have to, I had to work as any chef in a busy restaurant. I had to work so hard. And I sort of think, I'm sort of grateful for having put in 22, 23 years just solidly working in the kitchen, because I don't think anything else will ever seem quite so hard again. But there's also a great sort of camaraderie amongst chefs, and I got, my best friends are chefs, really. So it's a sort of industry that if you don't want to retire, you don't have to, particularly as it's my business, and so I don't have to retire. So I'm doing less. I'm handing over to my boys. I've got 3 boys; they're all involved in it. So I'm actually making a positive effort to retire and to withdraw from making the sort of daily decisions.
But that means that you can travel more, and you can.
Yeah.
Where's your sort of burning desire to travel next, or somewhere that you'd like to revisit?
Well, I've never been to South America, anywhere in South America, and people keep going on about how well travelled I am, but I really need to go to probably Argentina, Brazil, Peru. I think are those 3 that particularly need to go to, and I will. I don't know whether I'll film there, but because, it's quite hard. Television generally is not in a good state. There's not much money around, so I don't think I could. But I'll go with SAS and bring some recipes back and.
Yeah, interesting, trip to do. Anyway, all of those places, and Chile as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, those. They're definitely Chile. Fantastic seafood there,
yes.
Of course.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Of course, as you're a chef, the final question we always have to ask any chef is what your death row meal would be.
Well, I'm sort of fond of saying to the answer to that is I'd be so depressed I probably wouldn't be interested. But they do seem to always sort of what you read. So I guess if I was just saying, well, hey ho, I'm afraid it'd be really boring. But it'd be something like, I don't know, some really, really good smoked salmon to start with. Just maybe with a bit of lemon juice and cayenne pepper I really like, and some nice brown bread, thinly cut. And then it'd have to be turbot and hollandaise sauce with some new potatoes, proper British new potatoes. You don't get new potatoes in Australia. They're just, the first potatoes of the season. They're just so special. And some spinach, I think. And then for a pud, I don't know. I often say that my mum's bread and butter pudding would probably be it,
Yeah.
And to drink, well, it would have to be some white burgundy to go with the turbot. Yeah. And a smoked salmon as well, I think.
Oh, lovely.
And, but hey ho.
Yeah.
I'd probably have the whole bottle, then I'd say, yeah, bring it on.
No, that sounds wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Rick Stein, for talking to us. It's been wonderful to hear about your new book and about your career. And lots more to come.
Yes, hopefully.
Thank you.